The Anunnaki occupy a central and profoundly enigmatic place in the mythology of ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of one of humanity's earliest civilizations. Known in Sumerian as Anunna or Danunna, and in Akkadian as Anunnaki or Anunnaku, they formed a collective of powerful divine beings whose influence extended across the heavens, the earth, and eventually the underworld. Their very name carries deep significance. Derived from the Sumerian Anunna, it translates literally to princely offspring, royal seed, or progeny of the prince. This etymology directly ties them to An, Sumerian, An, Akkadian, Anu, the supreme god of the sky, the distant and sovereign father of many of the greatest deities in the Mesopotamian pantheon. In the earliest surviving texts, the Anunnaki are not presented as extraterrestrial visitors or alien engineers, as later popular theories would claim, but as an exalted lineage of gods, the celestial aristocracy born from the union of heaven and earth. An, the embodiment of the boundless sky, was paired with Ki, the earth goddess, often identified with Ninhursag, the great mother goddess. And from this primordial union sprang the most powerful members of the divine assembly. The Anunnaki, therefore, represent the princely descendants of this cosmic marriage, a group of high-born deities who held authority over the ordering of the universe and the fates of humankind. Mesopotamia, literally, the land between the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, stretched across what is now modern-day Iraq and parts of Syria and Turkey. From roughly 4,500 BCE onward, the Sumerians, a non-Semitic people whose language remains a linguistic isolate, established the world's first known urban civilization in the fertile alluvial plains of southern Mesopotamia. They built monumental city-states: Uruk, Ur, Nippur, Lagash, Eridu, Kish, Umma, Adab, and many others. Each city had its patron deity, its towering ziggurat temple, and its own local pantheon, yet overarching mythological structures unified them. Sumerian religion was deeply anthropomorphic. The gods were imagined as superhuman beings with human emotions, desires, rivalries, and even physical needs. They required food, drink, clothing, and shelter, all provided by human priests and temple personnel. The gods, in turn, granted fertility, victory in war, protection from floods, and justice. Myths were not mere stories. They were living explanations of the world, recited in temples, taught in scribal schools, and invoked in royal inscriptions. The Anunnaki first appear in written records during the post-Akkadian period, circa 2200 to 2100 BCE. Particularly in the time of Gudea of Lagash and the administrative texts of the Third Dynasty of Ur III, 2100 BCE, circa 2112 to 2004 BCE. In these earliest mentions, they are consistently described as the highest tier of the pantheon. The great gods, the great Anunna, the divine council that assembled under the presidency of An or Enlil to decree the fates of gods, cities, and human beings. Samuel Noah Kramer, one of the most influential 20th century summerologists, emphasized that in the oldest Sumerian literary tradition, the Anunnaki were heavenly deities of immense authority. They were often numbered symbolically, sometimes 7, sometimes 50, sometimes simply the great gods, without any fixed roster. The term could refer to the full pantheon of a particular city, the Anunna of Nippur, the Anunna of Eridu, or to the collective body of major deities who participated in the divine assembly. A key early text that illustrates their role is the myth Enki and the World Order, circa 2100 BCE or earlier. In this composition, Enki, the god of wisdom, fresh water, magic, and creation, organizes the world after the primordial chaos. The Anunnaki appear as participants in this cosmic ordering. They are assigned their places, they praise Enki, and they help establish the fundamental principles, that govern reality. The Mi were sacred decrees or powers that determined everything from kingship and priesthood to agriculture, weaving, and warfare. The Anunnaki's involvement in maintaining and distributing these Mi underscores their status as guardians of cosmic harmony. Archaeological discoveries from major Sumerian sites reinforce the centrality of the Anunnaki. Excavations at Nippur, the religious heart of Sumer, home to the great temple of Enlil called Ekur, Mountain House, have yielded tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets. Many administrative documents from the Third period record offerings of beer, bread, sheep, goats, and dates to the Anunna. These records demonstrate that, contrary to earlier assumptions, the Anunnaki were not merely abstract literary figures. They received real cultic worship, sacrifices, and invocations. In the southern city of Eridu, considered the oldest city in Sumerian tradition and the seat of Enki's temple Abzu, House of the Deep, similar offerings are attested. Famous for its royal tombs and the great ziggurat of Nana, the moon god, also preserves references to the Anunna in temple inventories and hymns. The physical remains of ziggurats, massive stepped pyramids built of mud brick and bitumen, served as artificial mountains linking earth to heaven, where priests performed rituals to honor the great gods, including the Anunnaki. As Mesopotamian civilization evolved, the role and identity of the Anunnaki underwent profound changes, reflecting shifts in political power, language, and religious emphasis. The rise of the Akkadian Empire under Sargon the Great, circa 2334 to 2279 BCE, marked the first major fusion of Sumerian and Semitic cultures. Akkadian, a Semitic language, gradually became the administrative lingua franca, while Sumerian remained the sacred language of religion and literature. In this period, the Anunnaki retained their status as high gods, but a new distinction began to emerge: the contrast between the Anunnaki and the Igigi. The Igigi appear in later texts as a lower tier of deities, younger gods who performed manual labor for the senior gods. The most famous depiction of this relationship occurs in the Old Babylonian Atrahasis epic, circa 1800 BCE, one of the most important flood myths preserved from Mesopotamia. According to Atrahasis, after 40 years of digging canals and maintaining the irrigation system, the Igigi rebelled against the toil imposed by the Anunnaki. The senior gods, led by Enlil, responded by creating humankind from clay, mixed with the blood of a slain lesser god, Weilu or Geshtu'i, to serve as laborers in place of the Igigi. Thus, humans became the servants of the gods, inheriting the burden the Igigi had rejected. This myth is not only cosmogonic, but deeply sociological. It mirrors the hierarchical structure of Mesopotamian society, where kings, priests, and elites ruled over masses of laborers and slaves. The Anunnaki, as the divine aristocracy, represent the ruling class. The Igigi symbolize the working gods, and humanity becomes the lowest rung, created explicitly to relieve the gods of physical toil. By the Old Babylonian period, circa 2000 to 1600 BCE, the Anunnaki began to acquire a more chthonic underworld character. In the famous myth Inanna's Descent to the Netherworld, known in both Sumerian and Akkadian versions, the goddess Inanna, later Ishtar, attempts to conquer the realm of the dead ruled by her sister Ereshkigal. Upon entering the underworld, she is judged by 7 Anunnaki who sit as judges. They pronounce her guilty of overreaching, strip her of her divine powers and garments, and condemn her to death. Only through the intervention of Enki is she eventually revived. Here, the Anunnaki function as stern, impartial judges of the dead, a role that would become increasingly dominant in later periods. The Babylonian Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, standardized around 1200 to 1100 BCE, represents the culmination of this transformation. In this text, the young god Marduk defeats the chaos dragon Tiamat and her army, then reorganizes the universe. After his victory, Marduk assigns the Anunnaki their places, 300 in heaven to serve him, and 300 in the underworld. The total of 600 Anunnaki now submit to Marduk's authority, and they build a Sagala, Marduk's temple in Babylon, as a reward for his triumph. This reorganization not only reflects Babylonian political dominance over older Sumerian and Akkadian traditions, but also elevates Marduk above the ancient Anunnaki. In the standard version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, circa 1200 BCE, the Anunnaki appear as 7 underworld judges who, during the Great Flood sent by Enlil, set the land ablaze with their torches. After the deluge, Ishtar and the Anunnaki weep for the destruction of humanity. These portrayals show the Anunnaki as both terrifying and compassionate, capable of wrathful destruction yet moved by human suffering. By the time of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, 911 to 612 BCE, the Anunnaki are almost exclusively underworld deities. They are invoked in curses, exorcisms, and royal inscriptions as powerful chthonic judges. The Hittites and Hurrians, circa 1600 to 1200 BCE, further equated them with banished primordial gods imprisoned beneath the earth, similar to the Greek Titans. Culturally and symbolically, the Anunnaki reflected the deepest structures of Mesopotamian thought: hierarchy, cosmic order, divine justice, and the interdependence of gods and humans. Their evolution from celestial decree makers to underworld judges mirrors the historical journey of Mesopotamia itself, from the independent Sumerian city-states to the great centralized empires of Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria. In conclusion, the Anunnaki began as the princely offspring of Enki, exalted heavenly gods who decreed fates and upheld the cosmic order in the earliest Sumerian tradition. Through centuries of cultural, linguistic, and political change, their role gradually shifted toward the underworld, where they became stern judges of the dead. This historical trajectory provides the essential foundation for understanding their functions in myth, ritual, and society, and for critically evaluating the many modern interpretations that would later arise. Having established the historical origins and evolving context of the Anunnaki in Part 1, we now turn our attention to their specific functions, the most prominent individual deities within or closely associated with this group, and the major mythological narratives in which they play decisive roles. The Anunnaki were never merely background figures in Mesopotamian religion. They were active agents in the cosmic drama, decision-makers in divine councils, creators and destroyers, judges and maintainers of order. Their multifaceted roles reflect the complexity of the society that conceived them. A civilization obsessed with hierarchy, justice, fertility, and the precarious balance between order and chaos. The divine hierarchy and collective roles of the Anunnaki. At the apex of the Mesopotamian pantheon stood an Anu in Akkadian, the sky god, distant and supreme, rarely intervening directly in earthly affairs. The Anunnaki were his princely offspring, an elite assembly whose collective authority was second only to his. In Sumerian texts, they are frequently called the Great Gods, Dingir Galgal Ene, or simply the Anunna. Their primary collective function was to participate in the divine assembly, Okin, a heavenly court modeled on human royal councils. This assembly met to deliberate on major decisions: the appointment of kings, the granting or withdrawal of the sacred powers known as Mi, the punishment of rebellious gods or cities, and the determination of human destinies. The concept of destiny, Namtar in Sumerian, was central. The Anunnaki, together with the major deities, decreed the fates, Namtar Tar-Re, a phrase that recurs across thousands of years of cuneiform literature. This act of decreeing was not passive, it was performative. Once spoken in the divine council, a fate became binding and unalterable, even by the gods themselves. This belief gave the Anunnaki an aura of terrifying inevitability. A second crucial collective role was the maintenance of cosmic order, Me. The Me were not mere laws. They were the divine blueprints for every aspect of existence: kingship, priesthood, truth, falsehood, agriculture, carpentry, weaving, warfare, sexual intercourse, lamentation, and even the art of prostitution. When Enki organizes the world in the myth, Enki and the world order, the Anunnaki are present as witnesses and beneficiaries, praising the new structure and receiving their assigned domains. Their approval legitimizes the entire cosmic framework. In later periods, especially Babylonian and Assyrian, the Anunnaki acquire a pronounced judicial function. They become the judges of the dead, particularly in the underworld. This shift is most clearly seen in the myth of Inanna's descent, where 7 Anunnaki sit in judgment, but it is also attested in incantations, curses, and Neo-Assyrian royal inscriptions, where kings invoke the Anunnaki, the great gods of the underworld, to enforce oaths and punish oath-breakers. Key individual figures. Among or closely associated with the Anunnaki. Although the Anunnaki are most often mentioned as a group, certain major deities are consistently counted among them, or are their immediate superiors. The following figures represent the core of the Anunnaki pantheon and the most powerful actors in their myths. An Anu, the sky god and patriarch. As the literal father of the Anunnaki, An is the ultimate authority, yet he is strikingly passive. In most narratives, he delegates power to Enlil or Marduk. He resides in the highest heaven, rarely descending. His name means simply sky or heaven, and he embodies the boundless vault above. En's most important role is symbolic. He legitimizes kingship. Every Mesopotamian ruler from the 3rd millennium onward claimed to rule by the command of An. Enlil, Lord of the Air, executive ruler. Enlil quickly became the most active leader of the Anunnaki, son of An and Ki Ninhursag. He is the god of wind, storms, and the space between heaven and earth. In the Sumerian tradition, Enlil is the one who separates heaven from earth, making the world habitable. He presides over the divine assembly in Nippur, issues decrees, and punishes disobedience, most famously by sending the flood in the Atrahasis and Gilgamesh epics. Enlil's temple, Ekur, was the religious center of Sumer. To anger Enlil was to invite destruction. Enki Ie, Lord of Wisdom, Fresh Water, and Magic. Enki is perhaps the most beloved and complex figure associated with the Anunnaki. God of the Absu, the subterranean freshwater ocean, he is the patron of wisdom, crafts, incantations, and creation. Unlike the stern Enlil, Enki is cunning, compassionate, and frequently saves humanity from the wrath of other gods. In Atrahasis, he creates humans to relieve the gods of labor. In the flood story, he warns Atrahasis/Utnapishtim to build the ark. Enki is also the god of semen and fertility, and his myths often involve trickery and problem-solving. Ninhursag/Ki/Ninma/Damkaina, the Great Mother. The Mother Goddess appears under many names. As Ki, she is Ain's consort and mother of the Anunnaki. As Ninhursag, she is Lady of the Mountain, a birth goddess. As Damkina, she becomes Ea's wife in Akkadian tradition. She assists Enki in creating humanity and is frequently invoked for fertility and healing. Inanna Ishtar, goddess of love, war, and Venus. Inanna is not always listed as one of the 7 underworld judges, but she is a daughter of An, or sometimes of Nana and Ningal, and interacts constantly with the Anunnaki. Her descent to the underworld is the most dramatic demonstration of their judicial power. She is the most dynamic female deity, embodying passion, ambition, and violence. Nana/Sin, the moon god father of Inanna, patron of Ur. Nana is a benevolent celestial deity whose cycles regulate the calendar and agriculture. Shamash, the sun god and god of justice. Utu is the divine judge who sees everything under the sun. He is often called upon to witness oaths and punish injustice. Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, sister of Inanna, ruler of Kur, the underworld. The 7 Anunnaki judges sit in her court. These figures, along with others, Nergal, Ninurta, Marduk in later periods, form the inner circle of the Anunnaki or their closest associates. The richest insights into the Anunnaki come from the great literary compositions preserved on clay tablets. Enki and the World Order, Sumerian early 2nd millennium BCE. This hymn-like myth describes Enki's organization of the universe after creation. The Anunnaki appear as a chorus, praising Enki and receiving their roles. They are portrayed as harmonious and subordinate, underscoring the ideal of divine cooperation. Atrahasis, Old Babylonian circa 1800 BCE. The fullest account of human creation. The Igigi labor for the Anunnaki until they rebel. The Anunnaki convene, and Enlil proposes the creation of a substitute worker. Enki and the Mother Goddess create humans from clay and the blood of a slain god. Later, when humanity becomes too noisy, Enlil sends plagues and finally the flood. Enki subverts the decree by saving one man. The Anunnaki are depicted as both oppressors and mourners. They weep when the flood destroys their children. Inanna's descent to the netherworld, Sumerian and Akkadian versions. The most vivid portrayal of the Anunnaki as judges. Inanna attempts to usurp the underworld. She is met by 7 gates, stripped of garments and powers, and brought before the 7 Anunnaki. They look at her with the eye of death and pronounce her doom. Only Enki's intervention revives her. This myth explores themes of death, power, and resurrection, and firmly establishes the Anunnaki as chthonic judges. Enuma Elish, Babylonian creation epic. Marduk defeats Tiamat, creates the world from her body, and assigns the Anunnaki, 300 in heaven, 300 in the underworld. They build Babylon and Esagila as their earthly dwelling. The poem ends with the gods reciting Marduk's 50 names, affirming his supremacy over the ancient Anunnaki. Epic of Gilgamesh, standard version, circa 1200 BCE. The Anunnaki appear in 2 key moments. During the flood, the 7 Anunnaki set the land ablaze with their torches, intensifying the destruction. Afterward, they join Ishtar in lamenting the loss of humanity. This emotional response humanizes them, showing that even the divine judges can feel regret. The Anunnaki were visualized with the typical divine attributes: horned crowns, up to 7 pairs indicating rank, ornate robes, and often wings in later iconography. They were associated with the Melam, a terrifying divine radiance that could overwhelm mortals. In art, they appear on cylinder seals, stelae, and temple reliefs, frequently in processions or seated in judgment. Rituals dedicated to the Anunnaki included offerings of food and drink, especially in Ur-3 administrative texts, purification ceremonies, and incantations against evil spirits. In the Neo-Assyrian period, kings invoked them in treaties and curses, believing their judicial authority would enforce political agreements. Conclusion: the Anunnaki as cosmic arbiters. In the ancient Mesopotamian worldview, the Anunnaki were far more than a pantheon. They were the institutional embodiment of divine justice, cosmic order, and the inescapable weight of destiny. As princely offspring of An, they began as heavenly decree makers. As centuries passed, they became the stern judges of the underworld. Through their roles in creation, rebellion, flood, and judgment, they reflected humanity's deepest anxieties and hopes. The fear of divine wrath, the longing for mercy, and the belief that order, however fragile, could be maintained. This rich mythological tapestry provides the essential background for understanding the dramatic reinterpretations that would emerge in the modern era when these ancient deities were recast in an entirely new light.